The arrival. The autumn wind swept through Central Park as Rosalie Pierce stepped off the bus at Columbus Circle, her worn suitcase clutched in one hand and a crumpled address in the other. 24 years old, fresh from the quiet farmlands of Ohio, she stood frozen for a moment, overwhelmed by the towers of glass and steel that surrounded her. New York City hummed with an energy that both excited and terrified her. She had left behind everything familiar after her grandmother's passing, the woman who had raised her since she was 3. Now, armed with nothing but a degree in early childhood education and a heart full of hope, Rosalie was ready to start over. The address led her to an elegant brownstone on the Upper East Side, its facade painted a sophisticated cream color with black wrought iron railings. Rosalie climbed the steps and pressed the doorbell, her pulse quickening. She smoothed down her simple gray dress, suddenly conscious of how modest her clothing was compared to the obvious wealth radiating from this neighborhood. The door opened to reveal a stern-looking woman in her 50s, her silver hair pulled back in a tight bun. She wore a crisp black dress that screamed efficiency. "Miss Pierce, I presume. I am Mrs. Caldwell, the household manager. Please, come in." Meeting the Ashfords. The interior of the home took Rosalie's breath away. Marble floors gleamed under crystal chandeliers, and artwork that looked like it belonged in museums adorned the walls. Everything spoke of old money and refined taste, yet something felt hollow about the space. Despite its beauty, the house felt cold, like a carefully curated museum where no one actually lived. "Mr. Ashford will see you in the library," Mrs. Caldwell announced, leading her through a series of elegant rooms. "He is very particular about Lily's care. The previous 3 nannies did not meet his standards." Rosalie's stomach twisted nervously. 3 failed nannies did not sound promising. The library was a sanctuary of dark wood and leather, shelves filled with books reaching from floor to ceiling. A man stood by the window, his back to her, hands clasped behind him. When he turned, Rosalie felt her breath catch. Vincent Ashford was perhaps in his mid-30s, tall and lean with dark hair that fell slightly over his forehead. His eyes were a striking shade of blue, but they held a sadness so profound it made her chest ache. He wore an expensive charcoal suit, perfectly tailored, and his presence commanded the room without effort. "Miss Pierce." His voice was deep, controlled. "Please sit." Rosalie settled into a leather chair, her hands folded in her lap. Vincent remained standing, studying her with an intensity that made her feel exposed. "Your credentials are adequate," he began, his tone businesslike. "However, caring for Lily requires more than education. She has not spoken since her mother died 18 months ago. Specialists say there is no physical reason for her silence. She simply chooses not to speak." The pain in his voice, carefully masked but still present, touched something deep in Rosalie's heart. She understood loss. She understood the silence that comes from grief too heavy for words. "Mr. Ashford," she said softly, "sometimes children do not need someone to fix them. They need someone to sit with them in the quiet until they are ready to find their voice again." Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or recognition. "My grandmother raised me after my parents died in a car accident," Rosalie continued. "I was 3 years old. She told me that for 6 months, I would not let anyone touch me. I would just sit in the corner and stare at the wall. She did not try to force me to talk or play. She would just sit near me, doing her knitting, humming old songs. One day, I climbed into her lap. That was when I started healing." Vincent was quiet for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he moved to his desk and pressed a button on the intercom. "Mrs. Caldwell, please bring Lily to the library." The silent child. When the door opened again, Rosalie's heart broke at the sight of the small girl who entered. Lily Ashford was tiny for 5 years old, with pale blonde hair that hung in limp strands around her delicate face. She wore a beautiful velvet dress in deep purple, but it seemed to hang on her small frame as if she had shrunk inside it. Her eyes, the same striking blue as her father's, were enormous in her pale face, but they held no light, no curiosity. They were the eyes of someone much older, someone who had seen too much sadness. Lily did not look at Rosalie. She did not look at her father. She simply stood in the doorway, her small hands clasped in front of her, waiting. Lily, Vincent's voice softened in a way that made Rosalie's throat tight. This is Miss Pierce. She might be staying with us to help take care of you. The little girl showed no reaction. Not a nod, not a smile, not even a glance in Rosalie's direction. Rosalie slowly rose from her chair and walked over to where her suitcase sat by the door. She knelt down, opened it, and carefully pulled out a small wooden box. Inside was a collection of colored pencils and a sketchbook, worn from years of use. "Hi, Lily," Rosalie said quietly, sitting down on the floor right there in the elegant library. "I am Rosalie, but you can call me Rose if you like. I am not very good at talking to people sometimes either. So instead, I like to draw." She opened her sketchbook to a page filled with drawings of butterflies, each one different, each one colored in bright, cheerful hues. "My grandmother taught me that butterflies are magical. They start as caterpillars, stuck on the ground, and then something amazing happens. They transform. They get wings. They get to fly." Lily remained motionless, but Rosalie noticed the smallest shift in her posture. The child's eyes had moved, just slightly, toward the sketchbook. Rosalie began to draw, her hand moving confidently across the page. She created a simple outline of a butterfly, then started filling it in with gentle strokes of color. She did not look at Lily. She did not ask the child to join her. She simply drew, humming softly under her breath the same old folk song her grandmother used to sing. Minutes passed in silence. Vincent watched from his position by the desk, his expression unreadable. Mrs. Caldwell stood frozen in the doorway, clearly uncertain about the nanny sitting on the floor. Then, so slowly it was almost imperceptible, Lily took a step forward. Then another. She stopped a few feet away from Rosalie, her eyes fixed on the drawing taking shape on the page. Rosalie continued drawing, adding delicate details to the butterfly's wings. She pulled out a purple pencil, Lily's favorite color judging by her dress, and began adding violet highlights. Another minute passed. Then Lily sank to her knees on the floor, still several feet away, but closer than before. Her eyes never left the sketchbook. When Rosalie finished the butterfly, she carefully tore the page from the book and set it on the floor between them, placing a purple pencil beside it. "Sometimes butterflies need friends," Rosalie said softly. "In case you want to draw one too. No pressure. I will be here drawing my own either way." She turned to a fresh page and began another butterfly, this one with blue wings to match Lily's eyes. The room was so quiet that when Lily's small hand finally reached out and picked up the purple pencil, the sound of it rolling on the paper seemed loud. The child pulled the drawing closer and, with careful, deliberate movements, began to add her own touches to the butterfly Rosalie had created. Vincent's breath caught in his chest. Mrs. Caldwell pressed a hand to her mouth. It was the first time in months that Lily had voluntarily engaged with anything or anyone. Rosalie kept drawing as if nothing extraordinary was happening, but inside, her heart soared with hope. She knew this was just the beginning, a tiny crack in the wall of grief that surrounded this precious child. But it was a start. When Lily finished adding her touches to the butterfly, she looked up at Rosalie for the first time. Their eyes met, and in that moment, an understanding passed between them. Lily did not smile, but something in her eyes softened, just a fraction. "Beautiful," Rosalie whispered. "You made it perfect." Vincent cleared his throat, his voice rough with emotion when he finally spoke. "Miss Pierce, when can you start?" Rosalie looked up at him, then back at the small girl sitting on the floor with a purple pencil in her hand. "I already have," she said softly. That evening, as the sun set over Manhattan, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Rosalie unpacked her few belongings in the room that would be hers. It was beautiful, decorated in soft creams and golds, with a window overlooking a small private garden. It was the nicest room she had ever stayed in, but that was not what made her heart feel full. Down the hall, in a room painted like a fairy tale castle, a little girl slept with a drawing of a purple and blue butterfly clutched in her small hand. And for the first time in 18 months, Lily Ashford's sleep was peaceful, unmarred by the nightmares that usually plagued her. In his own room, Vincent stood at the window, looking out at the city lights. For the first time since his wife's death, he felt something other than the numbing grief that had consumed him. He felt hope. And beneath that, something more complicated, something he was not ready to name. The young woman with gentle eyes and a kind heart had walked into his home and, in less than an hour, had reached his daughter in a way no one else could. He knew it was dangerous, this feeling stirring in his chest. Rosalie was his employee, young and innocent, everything he was not. But as he stood there in the darkness, he could not stop thinking about the way she had looked sitting on his library floor, the way her voice had softened when she spoke to Lily, the way something had shifted in the air when their eyes met. Vincent pressed his forehead against the cool glass of the window. He had built walls around his heart, had sworn never to let anyone in again. The pain of losing his wife had nearly destroyed him. He could not risk that kind of pain again. But as he closed his eyes, he saw Rosalie's face, the warmth in her hazel eyes, the way she had understood his daughter's pain without explanation. And he wondered if perhaps, just perhaps, some walls were meant to be broken down, morning light and new routines. The first rays of morning sun filtered through the gauzy curtains of Rosalie's room, waking her gently. For a moment, she forgot where she was, then the events of yesterday came flooding back. She was in New York, in the Ashford home, responsible for a silent little girl who had touched her heart immediately. Rosalie dressed quickly in a soft blue sweater and jeans, pulling her chestnut hair into a loose braid. As she stepped into the hallway, she noticed Lily's bedroom door was already open. Her heart quickened with concern, and she hurried down the corridor. She found Lily sitting on the floor of her room, still in her nightgown, surrounded by the drawings they had made together yesterday. The little girl was holding the purple butterfly, tracing its wings with one small finger. When Rosalie appeared in the doorway, Lily looked up, and though she did not smile, there was a glimmer of recognition in her eyes. "Good morning, sweet girl," Rosalie said softly, sitting down beside her. "Did you sleep well?" Lily did not respond, but she shifted slightly closer to Rosalie, which felt like a victory. "How about we get dressed and then make breakfast together? I make terrible pancakes. They always turn out lumpy and weird-shaped. Maybe you can help me make them better." For the first time, Rosalie saw the corners of Lily's mouth twitch, not quite a smile, but almost. The child stood and walked to her closet, pulling out a simple yellow dress. Rosalie helped her get ready, brushing her blonde hair gently, careful not to pull or rush. She had learned from her grandmother that children who had been hurt needed gentleness in everything. In the kitchen, Mrs. Caldwell was already preparing coffee, her expression disapproving when she saw Rosalie. "Mr. Ashford takes his breakfast at 7 sharp, she said curtly. "Lily usually has oatmeal in the morning room. Would it be all right if Lily and I made pancakes this morning?" Rosalie asked politely. It might be good for her to help with something. Mrs. Caldwell's lips pressed into a thin line, but before she could respond, Vincent's voice came from the doorway. "That sounds perfect." He stood there in dark slacks and a crisp white shirt, his tie not yet knotted, hanging loose around his neck. His hair was slightly damp from a shower, and Rosalie felt her cheeks warm at the sight of him. There was something about this early morning version of Vincent Ashford, slightly less polished than the businessman from yesterday, that made her pulse quicken. "You do not mind?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "I mind a great deal," he said, and her heart sank until she saw the hint of amusement in his eyes. "I mind that I was not invited to help make these supposedly terrible pancakes." Lily's eyes widened slightly, and she looked between her father and Rosalie with something that might have been surprise. The pancake disaster. What followed was perhaps the most chaotic breakfast the elegant Ashford kitchen had ever seen. Rosalie measured flour while Vincent cracked eggs, discovering that a man who commanded boardrooms and business empires was utterly hopeless at separating yolks from whites. Lily stood on a step stool, carefully stirring the batter with intense concentration. "I think it needs more milk," Vincent said, peering into the bowl. "I think it needs less of whatever you just added," Rosalie countered, trying not to laugh as the batter turned alarmingly thin. Lily reached for the flour bag and added a generous scoop, creating a cloud of white powder that settled on all three of them. Rosalie gasped, then started laughing, brushing flour from her sweater. Vincent stood frozen, white powder dusting his dark hair and expensive shirt, looking so stunned that Rosalie laughed harder. Then something magical happened. Lily's shoulders began to shake. At first, Rosalie thought she was crying, but then she realized the little girl was laughing. Silent, breathless laughter, but laughter nonetheless. Her eyes sparkled with genuine joy, and her small hand covered her mouth as she looked at her flour-covered father. Vincent's expression transformed. The careful control he always maintained cracked, and a genuine smile spread across his face, reaching his eyes for the first time since Rosalie had met him. He looked years younger, devastatingly handsome, and so full of love for his daughter that Rosalie felt her throat tighten with emotion. "Oh, you think this is funny?" Vincent said to Lily, his voice warm with affection. He reached into the flour bag and gently tapped some onto Lily's nose, making her eyes widen in delighted shock. The pancakes that eventually emerged were indeed lumpy and misshapen, some burned, some undercooked, absolutely perfect. They ate them at the kitchen table rather than the formal dining room, drowning them in syrup and laughing at their culinary disaster. Mrs. Caldwell watched from the doorway with an expression caught between disapproval and something softer, something that might have been hope. Lily ate more breakfast than she had in months, and though she still did not speak, her eyes were brighter, more present. She kept looking at Rosalie and her father as if memorizing this moment, storing it away like a precious treasure. Afternoon in the garden. After breakfast, while Vincent reluctantly left for his office, Rosalie took Lily out to the private garden behind the brownstone. It was a small oasis in the middle of the city, filled with flowering plants and a beautiful old oak tree that provided dappled shade. Rosalie spread a blanket on the grass and brought out her art supplies. She had also grabbed one of the many books from the library, a collection of poetry her grandmother used to read to her. "My grandmother believed that words had magic in them," Rosalie told Lily as they settled on the blanket. "Not spell magic, but the kind of magic that makes you feel things." She would read to me every single day. Lily watched her with those serious blue eyes, and Rosalie began to read. She chose poems about nature, about birds and flowers and the changing seasons. Her voice was soft and melodic, and she did not rush, letting each word settle in the air between them. After a few poems, Rosalie set the book aside and picked up her sketchbook. She began drawing the oak tree, its branches spreading wide above them. Lily watched for a while, then picked up her own pencil and started drawing on a fresh page. They worked in comfortable silence, the kind that did not need filling. Rosalie had learned that silence was not always empty. Sometimes it was full of healing. "I miss my mama too," Rosalie said quietly, not looking at Lily but knowing the child was listening. "Every single day. Sometimes the missing feels so big that I think it might swallow me whole. But then I remember something she taught me, or I see something that reminds me of her, and the missing becomes different. It is still there, but it is mixed with love and good memories. The pain does not go away, but it becomes something you can carry." Lily's pencil stilled on the paper. She looked at Rosalie with such intensity that it took Rosalie's breath away. "Your mama loved you so much," Rosalie continued, her voice gentle. "I never met her, but I know this is true because you exist. You are the proof of her love. And that love does not disappear just because she is not here anymore. It lives inside you, always. A single tear rolled down Lily's cheek. Then another. The little girl's face crumpled, and suddenly she was crying, really crying, for the first time since her mother's death. Deep, wrenching sobs that shook her small body. Rosalie immediately gathered her into her arms, holding her close, rocking her gently. "It is okay," she whispered. "Let it out, sweet girl. Let it all out. I am here. I am right here." Lily clung to her, her small fists clutching Rosalie's sweater as 18 months of buried grief poured out of her. Rosalie held her through it all, tears streaming down her own face, her heart breaking and mending at the same time. She did not know how long they sat there under the oak tree, but eventually Lily's sobs subsided into hiccups, then into quiet breathing. The child did not pull away. She stayed curled in Rosalie's arms, exhausted but somehow lighter, as if a terrible weight had been lifted. "You are so brave," Rosalie whispered, pressing a kiss to the top of Lily's head. "So incredibly brave." An evening of understanding. That evening, Vincent came home earlier than usual to find Rosalie and Lily in the living room. Lily was curled up on the couch, fast asleep, her head in Rosalie's lap. Rosalie was reading, one hand unconsciously stroking Lily's hair. The sight made something in Vincent's chest tighten almost painfully. It looked so natural, so right. Like a picture of something he had thought was lost forever, the warmth of family, of home. Rosalie looked up when she heard him enter, putting a finger to her lips. Carefully, she slid out from under Lily, replacing her lap with a cushion. The child murmured in her sleep but did not wake. "She had a breakthrough today," Rosalie said quietly, leading Vincent to the hallway where they could talk without disturbing Lily. "She cried. Really cried. It was hard to watch, but I think she needed it." Vincent leaned against the wall, his expression a mixture of relief and pain. "I have been trying to get her to express something, anything, for over a year." "How did you know what to do?" "I did not know," Rosalie admitted. "I just followed my instincts. And I told her the truth about grief and loss. Sometimes children need to know that adults understand their pain, that it is okay to feel it." They stood close in the narrow hallway, and Rosalie became acutely aware of Vincent's presence, the warmth radiating from him, the way his blue eyes studied her face as if trying to memorize every detail. "Rosalie," he said, and the way he said her name made her heart skip. Not Miss Pierce, but Rosalie, soft and personal. "I do not know how to thank you." "You do not have to," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "Lily is special. She deserves every bit of love and patience I can give her." "And what about you?" Vincent asked. "What do you deserve?" The question hung in the air between them, loaded with meaning. Rosalie felt her breath catch. She knew she should step back, maintain professional distance, but she found herself frozen, caught in the intensity of his gaze. "I deserve to help heal the people I care about," she finally said. "And do you care about us?" The question was vulnerable, real, so different from the controlled businessman she had first met. "Yes," Rosalie whispered. "More than I probably should." Vincent reached out, his hand hovering near her face as if he wanted to touch her but was not sure he had the right. His thumb gently brushed away a tear on her cheek that she had not realized was there. "I have been trying not to feel this," he said, his voice rough. "Trying to tell myself it is inappropriate, that you are too young, that I am your employer. I have been trying very hard to be sensible." "How is that working out?" Rosalie asked, attempting lightness even as her heart raced. A small smile tugged at his lips. "Terribly." They stood there, the space between them charged with possibility and danger. Then, from the living room, they heard Lily stir, calling out in her sleep. The spell broke. Vincent stepped back, running a hand through his hair. "I should check on her." "Of course," Rosalie said, but neither of them moved immediately. "This cannot happen," Vincent said, though his eyes said something different. "I cannot risk complicating things when Lily is finally making progress." "I know," Rosalie agreed, even as her heart protested. "She has to come first." But as they returned to the living room, as Vincent gently lifted his sleeping daughter and carried her upstairs, Rosalie knew that something fundamental had shifted between them. The attraction was undeniable, the connection real. And despite every logical reason to resist it, her heart was already falling for the broken man and his precious daughter. That night, lying in her bed, Rosalie stared at the ceiling and wondered what she had gotten herself into. She had come to New York to escape grief, to start fresh. Instead, she had walked straight into a situation that would require every ounce of strength she possessed. In his own room, Vincent sat in the dark, remembering the feel of Rosalie's skin under his thumb, the way she had looked at him in that hallway. He had meant what he said. This could not happen. But wanting something and being able to stop it were two entirely different things. 3 weeks of transformation. 3 weeks passed in a blur of golden autumn days. The Ashford home had transformed from a silent mausoleum into a place where laughter echoed through the halls. Lily still had not spoken, but she communicated in dozens of other ways now. She would tug on Rosalie's hand to show her things, nod or shake her head in response to questions, and her drawings had become more colorful, more alive. Every evening, Vincent came home earlier than he had in years. He told himself it was to spend time with Lily, but he knew the truth. He was drawn to Rosalie like a moth to flame, helpless against the pull of her warmth and kindness. They established routines that felt dangerously like family. Dinner together at the kitchen table, with Lily helping to set out plates and napkins. Story time in the living room, with all three of them curled up on the couch. Bedtime rituals where Vincent would kiss Lily goodnight, and Rosalie would sing her Spanish lullabies that made the little girl's eyes drift closed peacefully. And through it all, the tension between Vincent and Rosalie grew. Accidental touches that lingered too long. Stolen glances across the room. Conversations that went deeper than employer and employee should go. They were both fighting it, both trying to maintain proper boundaries, but the battle was becoming harder each day. One Saturday morning, Mrs. Caldwell had the day off, leaving the three of them alone in the brownstone. Rain pattered against the windows, creating a cozy atmosphere that invited staying indoors. "How about we build a fort?" Rosalie suggested, looking at the rainy weather. "A really big one, big enough for all of us." Lily's eyes lit up with excitement, and she immediately started pulling cushions from the couch. Vincent watched them with amusement, his tie already loosened, having decided to work from home that day. "I have conference calls," he protested weakly, but Rosalie gave him a look that made his heart skip. "Conference calls can wait. Your daughter wants to build a fort with you." How could he argue with that? The fort and the truth. They spent the morning constructing an elaborate fort that took over the entire living room. Sheets draped from furniture, pillows creating walls and pathways, blankets forming a cozy ceiling. Inside, they strung up small battery-powered lights that Rosalie had bought, creating a magical glow. When it was finished, the three of them crawled inside, settling onto the mound of pillows and blankets. Lily sat between them, her head resting on Rosalie's shoulder, her small hand holding her father's. "This is perfect," Rosalie said softly, looking around at their creation. The fairy lights cast gentle shadows, and the rain outside made their fort feel like its own little world. Vincent looked at his daughter's peaceful face, then at Rosalie, and felt something break open inside his chest. This was what he had thought was lost forever. This sense of home, of belonging, of family. Not the cold, pristine existence he had been living, but this warm, messy, beautiful chaos. "Rosalie," he said quietly, and something in his voice made her look at him. "Can we talk? Really talk?" She glanced at Lily, who had fallen asleep between them, exhausted from the excitement of fort building. "What about?" Rosalie asked, though she suspected she knew. Vincent carefully shifted Lily so she was lying comfortably, then he looked at Rosalie with an intensity that made her breath catch. About how I cannot stop thinking about you. About how every logical part of my brain tells me this is wrong, inappropriate, impossible, and yet every other part of me does not care. Rosalie's heart hammered in her chest. Vincent, we should not. I know we should not. Believe me, I have told myself that 1,000 times. You work for me. You are young. This could complicate everything with Lily. He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. But I am tired of lying to myself. I am falling for you, Rosalie. I have been falling since the moment you sat on my library floor and drew butterflies with my daughter. Tears pricked Rosalie's eyes. I am falling for you too, she whispered. Both of you. And it terrifies me because I have already lost so much. I do not know if I can survive losing more. Then we do not lose each other, Vincent said, reaching across their sleeping daughter to take Rosalie's hand. We figure this out together. How? How do we make this work? Honestly. Carefully. Putting Lily first always. He squeezed her hand gently. I lost my wife, and it nearly destroyed me. I swore I would never open my heart again. But you walked into our lives and reminded me that the heart is made to be opened, that love is not something to fear but something to cherish. Rosalie looked down at Lily's peaceful face, then back at Vincent. She has to be our priority. If this ever becomes harmful to her, then we stop, Vincent agreed. Her well-being comes first. Always. They sat there in the fort, hands clasped over their sleeping daughter, and something settled between them. An understanding, a commitment, a promise to try. The storm and the words. That evening, after Lily woke from her nap, they had dinner in the fort. Sandwiches and fruit, nothing fancy, but it felt like the most special meal Vincent had ever had. They played simple games, told stories, and laughed at silly jokes. As night fell, the rain outside intensified into a proper storm. Thunder rumbled in the distance, and lightning occasionally lit up the windows. Lily, who had been cheerful all day, suddenly became tense, her small body rigid. It is okay, sweet girl, Rosalie soothed, pulling her close. It is just a storm. We are safe inside. But Lily's breathing quickened, her eyes wide with fear. She pressed herself against Rosalie, trembling. Vincent moved closer, recognizing the signs of a panic attack. The night her mother died, there was a storm, he said quietly to Rosalie. A terrible one. She has been terrified of them ever since. Rosalie held Lily tighter, beginning to hum softly, the same lullaby she sang every night. Vincent wrapped his arms around both of them, creating a protective circle. Together, they rocked gently, whispering reassurances. You are safe, Rosalie murmured. We have got you. Your daddy is here. I am here. Nothing bad is going to happen. We love you so much, princess, Vincent added, his voice thick with emotion. So very much. The storm raged outside, thunder crashing loudly enough to shake the windows. Lily's trembling intensified, and tears streamed down her cheeks. Her mouth opened as if she was trying to say something, struggling against the silence that had held her captive for so long. It is okay, Rosalie encouraged gently. Whatever you need to say, we are listening. Lily looked up at her father, then at Rosalie, her small face scrunched with effort. Her lips formed shapes, sounds caught in her throat. Take your time, princess, Vincent said, hope and fear warring in his voice. Another crash of thunder. Lily flinched, then suddenly, desperately, words burst from her lips. Do not leave me. Please do not leave me. The words were scratchy from disuse, barely more than a whisper, but they were words. Real, precious words. Vincent's face crumpled, tears streaming down his cheeks. Never, he said fiercely, gathering his daughter close. I will never leave you. I promise. Me neither, Rosalie added, her own tears falling freely. I am not going anywhere, sweet girl. I promise you that too. Lily sobbed against her father's chest, but they were different tears now. Not just fear, but relief, the breaking of a dam that had held back too much for too long. I miss Mama, Lily said, the words tumbling out now that the seal was broken. I miss her so much. I am scared I will forget her face. Oh, baby, Vincent held her tighter. You will never forget her. We have pictures, videos, stories. And she lives inside you, in your smile, in your kindness, in everything beautiful about you. And it is okay to miss her, Rosalie added, stroking Lily's hair. You can love your mama who is in heaven and also let new people into your heart. Love does not run out. It grows bigger to make room for everyone. Lily pulled back slightly, looking at Rosalie with red, swollen eyes. Do you love us? The question hung in the air. Rosalie looked at Vincent, seeing the same question in his eyes, the same hope, the same fear. Yes, Rosalie said, her voice clear and certain. I love you both very much. I love you too, Rose, Lily whispered, using the nickname for the first time. Vincent reached out, cupping Rosalie's face gently. And I love you, he said, his voice raw with emotion. Both my girls. The storm continued outside, but inside the fort, wrapped in blankets and love, they held each other close. A broken family finding healing, a lonely girl finding her voice, a grieving man finding hope, and a young woman finding home. 6 months later. The spring sun warmed the private garden behind the brownstone. The oak tree had burst into full leaf, creating dappled shade over the blanket where Rosalie sat with her sketchbook. Lily was beside her, chattering happily about her day at school, her voice clear and bright. And then Tommy said his drawing was better than mine, but Miss Peters said we are all artists in our own way, and that comparing is silly. Miss Peters is very wise, Rosalie agreed, smiling at the animated little girl who bore little resemblance to the silent, withdrawn child she had met 6 months ago. The back door opened, and Vincent appeared, having come home early from work again. It had become his habit, this prioritizing of family over business. His company had not suffered, if anything, his improved mood and focus had made him more effective. There are my favorite people, he said, settling on the blanket beside them. Lily immediately launched into a retelling of her school day while Vincent listened with genuine interest. When she finished and ran off to examine a butterfly that had landed nearby, Vincent turned to Rosalie. I have something to ask you, he said, his voice serious but his eyes warm. Rosalie's heart skipped. Over the past 6 months, their relationship had deepened in ways she had never imagined possible. They had been careful, taking things slowly for Lily's sake, but the love between them had only grown stronger. Vincent pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. I know this is fast by some standards. I know people will say we have not known each other long enough. But I also know that I have never been more certain of anything in my life. He opened the box to reveal a beautiful ring, simple but elegant, with a single diamond that caught the sunlight. Rosalie Pierce, you walked into our lives and brought light back to this home. You gave my daughter her voice and gave me back my heart. You have shown us both what it means to love fearlessly, to heal bravely, to live fully. Will you marry me? Will you make our family official? Tears streamed down Rosalie's face as she looked at the man she loved, then at Lily, who had abandoned the butterfly and was watching them with eager, hopeful eyes. Yes, Rosalie said, her voice breaking with joy. Yes, 1,000 times yes. Vincent slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into a kiss that was tender and passionate and full of promise. When they broke apart, Lily was jumping up and down with excitement. Does this mean Rose is going to be my new mama? She asked, her eyes shining. If that is okay with you, Rosalie said, opening her arms. Lily flew into them. It is more than okay. It is perfect. As they sat together in the garden, the three of them wrapped in an embrace, Rosalie thought about the journey that had brought her here. She had come to New York running from grief, carrying nothing but a suitcase and a heart full of pain. She had walked into a home filled with sadness and silence, expecting only a job. Instead, she had found everything. A daughter to love, a man who cherished her, a family that needed her as much as she needed them. She had learned that broken things could be mended, that silence could give way to laughter, that walls built from pain could be torn down by love. I love you both so much, she whispered, holding them close. We love you too, Vincent said, pressing a kiss to her temple. Our beautiful Rose. Our light. Our home. In the oak tree above them, a butterfly landed on a branch, its wings brilliant purple and blue. Lily pointed to it with delight. Look, it is like the first butterfly you drew for me. Remember? I remember, Rosalie said, thinking about that first day, about the silent child who had been so afraid to hope. I will always remember. The butterfly spread its wings and took flight, soaring up into the bright spring sky. And as they watched it go, the three of them held each other close, no longer broken pieces but a whole family, bound together by healing, by hope, by love. The Ashford brownstone, once cold and silent, was now filled with warmth and laughter. Where sadness had lived, joy had taken root. Where fear had ruled, love had conquered. And in the heart of it all was a young woman from Ohio who had learned that sometimes, the family you need finds you when you least expect it. Vincent looked at his daughter and his future wife, at the life they had built together from the ashes of grief, and knew that this was the truest thing he had ever known. Love was not about perfection. It was about showing up, being vulnerable, letting people in even when you were terrified. Rosalie had taught him that. She had taught them both. As the afternoon sun warmed the garden and Lily chased another butterfly through the flowers, Vincent pulled Rosalie close and whispered in her ear. Thank you for choosing us. Thank you for bringing light back into our lives. Rosalie smiled, tears of happiness glistening in her eyes. Thank you for letting me in. Thank you for teaching me that home is not a place, but people who love you. They kissed again, soft and sweet, while their daughter played nearby, her laughter the most beautiful sound in the world. In the city that never sleeps, in a quiet garden behind a brownstone on the Upper East Side, a family had been born from sorrow and healed by love. And that love would carry them forward, through all the seasons of life, through joy and challenge, through every tomorrow that awaited them. Because sometimes, the sweetest surprises come not in grand gestures, but in quiet moments. In butterflies drawn on paper. In pancakes burned together. In forts built from blankets. In the courage to speak after silence. In the bravery to love after loss. And in a nanny who stepped into a lonely home and delivered the greatest gift of all, the reminder that broken hearts can mend, that families can be reborn, and that love, when given freely and fearlessly, has the power to transform everything. The end.